Welcome to the Somatic Movement Summit, a free online event where you'll learn from leading experts how to embody all of yourself through the medicine of movement. Share this powerful program with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at The Shift Network. And now your host, Brian Siddhartha Engel.
Hello, everybody. I'm here with Angela Mcmillan. She's a transformational movement coach. Angela is based in Australia and is educational dance teacher and Feldenkrais practitioner. She has specialized in using social media and technology to bring transformative movement to people across the globe. You're all the way from Adelaide, Australia. Welcome to the show. How are you doing this morning or this afternoon, Angela?
I'm fantastic, thanks. How are you? And thank you so much for having me on the summit.
My pleasure. I am doing very well too. The first question I'd like to ask you is, how did you get into somatic movement? What was your path and journey?
So I did a professional dance training program at university, and the year after I was dabbling in some breakdance. I just thought it was amazing art form and utilising my talents. And I was trying to master the windmill. That's the move where you're rolling around on your shoulders and your legs are in the air. It's really dynamic move. And I just couldn't get it. I met my Feldenkrais teacher and he said to me, go slow. And if you know the windmill, you can see that going slow you're not going to get it. You need the momentum to get around. But I did what he asked, and lo and behold, I was able to master this move very, very quickly. And so I was like, oh, this sounds fun and interesting. And I did a couple of workshops with my teacher and then decided to do a professional training program starting in 2000 in Sydney. So 20 years this year since I began my Feldenkrais journey.
And how has the Feldenkrais method impacted your work as a dance teacher?
So since completing my Feldenkrais training, I then went on and did an education course to teach dance at middle and high school level. And how that impacted me is often I would see my students and they were tight or stuttering somewhere in their movement. You can see that it wasn't smooth or fluid, even though I was out the front showing them, and so they were mimicking what I was doing. So very quickly I learned how to break down what I wanted to teach them and help them to feel from the inside out what they were missing in their movement vocabulary. And also, when it comes to stretching, from what I know with Feldenkrais, it's not always the best option for young bodies to be overstretching. So I include a lot of somatic movement in my warm-ups and training for my dance students.
I've taught children yoga in the past in school setting, and I find it very hard to get them to sort of slow down and be aware, and I often have to make a lot of games to make them really get involved and pay attention. But a straight awareness through movement lesson where you're just rolling around and being quiet on the floor doesn't really suit that age. They were all like around 9 or 10, I think, at the time when I was working. What is your strategies with Feldenkrais and dance around that age group?
I mainly work with a little bit older, but when I have worked with students of that age, the same thing. I use games, especially the book on the foot. It's always fun to bring the books out and they think, but we're in a movement class. So the book on the foot's where you balance a book on the foot and ask them to roll. So that's a really fun way I've used to engage them. My son, who's 11 now, when he started doing Feldenkrais with me, similar thing, I would give him challenging movements to try and then say, okay, try this, this and this, and then go back to that initial movement and he would feel a change. So that's what got him hooked into learning.
And of course, we have I know that in Australia, everybody is into, movement and working out. I was there this year actually in Sydney, in one of the suburbs there, and you'd get up in 6:30 in the morning and all the beaches were totally packed with people working out and surfing and volleyball. And I've noticed that out of all cultures that I've worked in, that Australia gives most importance to fitness and aesthetic appearance and sports. They really seem big on that. How do you think that somatic movement can change the fitness culture, especially in your country where fitness and looking good seems to be paramount important, especially in these cities like Australia and Melbourne? I mean, Sydney and Melbourne.
Yeah, well, I like to use the catchphrase, to have a full fitness diet, you want to include somatic movement. With somatic movement, you're able to connect with yourself and listen to yourself in a much deeper way than what the traditional fitness industry teaches us, and this goal-orientated approach to fitness. What you can use somatic movement for in your fitness training programs is to first listen to, well, how heavy do the weights need to be so that I'm challenged just enough to push myself that little bit further, but not too much that I'm going to injure myself or hurt myself. And secondly, to listen in a way that if you are hurting, to not completely shut down that area or stop moving, but where can you move? Where's easier to move? So then you can recover quicker from injury and also prevent injuries as well when you are listening to your body in that way. That's where I feel that somatic movement can really neatly fit within the fitness and health culture.
Yeah, I've also worked a lot with gym sort of stuff as well. And when I started getting into somatic movement, I started playing around more with the eccentric contraction. So it's concentric contraction is when we, like if it's the biceps, we shorten the muscle, and an eccentric contraction is when we lengthen the muscle. And when we get into eccentric contractions, we engage the sensory motor cortex of the brain, which is up here, which has the ability to reset the resting level of the muscle. So what I've noticed with people who do a lot of gym work is that they focus on the shortening of the muscle all the time, and then they don't get access to the full length of the muscle, and they actually don't get as strong because they're not using it. So what I started doing was when I was working out in the gym, I would get more into the awareness around the eccentric contraction and come to a full stop, so I could reset the resting level of the muscle. And rather than the muscles becoming short and bulky, they'd become long, and I'd access the full range of movement. And I would do it in a much slower and relaxed way. Does that something that you've worked with too?
Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to dance, I'm always focused on both of those muscles. So just a leg raise, often we're taught in dance, well, how high can it go? But I get my dancers not to just focus on how high, but their placement and then the coming down, the bringing the leg back down. So that's just one simple explanation of how I use it in the dance. And making things reversible as well. When it came to breakdance, often with elite athletes, and in that, in breakdance, in BMX bikes, rollerblading, they all just usually do one side, where I like to teach that you should do both sides to become a master at anything. So when it came to breakdance, I wanted to master the windmill on both sides. So that's what I like to teach in my classes as well.
And you mentioned also how the stretching aspect, and that's not possibly suitable for children. And I would say that's actually not really a good way to go for most adults, especially if you have shortened muscles already and you have injured muscles already, because of course, as you and I both know, there's something called a stretch reflex. So when you stretch a muscle, it actually gets more tight. in some cases. So rather than working, it's like in yoga, a lot of the work is around stretching. And the way that I think that they should work with it is just actively engage so that you have a muscle working and the opposing muscle lengthens. So if there's some action involved, voluntary action involved rather than stretching, then you're going to avoid that stretch reflex and you get a lengthening of the opposing muscle group because you're actively engaging the muscle group that you're working.
Yeah.
Is that a strategy too that you use?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Taking my students to that point just before they feel the tension in their muscle, getting them to move at that point. And also sometimes it's appropriate to add weight at that point as well.
Another strategy that I find that's very useful in the Feldenkrais method is respecting the antagonist limit. And that's a very nuanced way of working, and most people can't find that. I'd like to spend a moment talking about it because it is very, very rich. So when we move a muscle, we come to a full stop at the end, and that's nowhere near the antagonist limit. It's like, for instance, if I'm engaging my biceps and I'm working it, and it feels like I'm moving through water, and then I hit honey, and something's a little sticky in my triceps, then that's my antagonist limit. And I know in the Feldenkrais method that we have to observe our limits. And if we can really become nuanced in the awareness around where our antagonist limit is, and not even just before pain or where we're blocked, but way, way before that. So it usually looks more than using around 50 or 60% of the possible range of movement when we get into that antagonist limit. Where is that? Where does it become honey sort of feeling? When we pass through water and then we go back to what we were doing before. Is that another strategy that you've worked with?
Yeah, always listening to what's smooth, how even and smooth can you make the movement, especially when it comes to moving the thoracic area. I find so many of the young people I work with are so tight here. And I'm sure there's so many adults as well. We're always hunched over. So really opening up the chest and listening to how they move in that area to give more expression when they are performing.
And I know that you do a lot of work online and teaching others how to teach online. What was your trajectory and path into that, which is obviously very useful during this current time where we're not allowed to be in groups? And it's probably the way of the future. Tell me a little bit about that path for you.
So for a long time, I did just work with dancers. And 5 years ago, I opened up my Feldenkrais practice to open it up to adults and other people in the community. And at the time, I put my postcards out in the letterboxes and did the traditional way of marketing. And then on Facebook and on other social media platforms, I was seeing the sponsored posts about how to grow a business. So I wanted to look into, well, how do I use Facebook advertising and social media to grow my practice? And dived in, spent the money and invested in an online business coach, and fell in love with using technology and social media to share my message with the world. And it was during one of my promotions where I had Facebook ads running, I had a whole social media strategy in place, that one of my colleagues, my Feldenkrais colleagues, reached out to me and said, "This looks really amazing, really professional. Do you teach others?" And I hadn't thought about it before. And then I thought, well, I could possibly do that. So I actually took on some of my colleagues. Interesting enough, that person has never worked with me using social media, but I do love teaching that. And what I love mostly is helping them find their voice online. So what's worked for me and other people may not be what they're comfortable with expressing online. So really working with them on finding their voice, what they're comfortable with, how they want to interact with people online. So it's really been a lovely journey. In fact, just before this, I was chatting with one of my new students. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I was thinking that perhaps you could lead us through awareness through movement lesson, just a mini one, maybe for 15 minutes. Do you think you could do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I'll just set up the camera so that I'm on the floor, and then you can just start talking, and I'll get to it. So you can take over from now.
Okay, I will. So to begin with, sense the contact your body makes with the floor. Notice the weight of your pelvis on the floor. Notice the weight of your chest. Is there a difference in the weight behind the right side of the pelvis compared with the left? Is there a difference in the weight behind the right side of the chest compared to the left? Notice the span of the lower back. Where does it lift away the top of the pelvis and reconnect behind the ribs? Notice the length of your legs on the floor, the right leg compared with the left, and the shapes that the heels are making on the floor. Is there a little bit of a difference in how they're resting, the right compared to the left? So take a snapshot of how you are now resting on the ground, and we'll return to this position after a few movements. To begin, bring your feet up into standing, so the knees are bent and the feet are flat on the floor, comfortable distance apart, not too close together, not too far apart, and just notice what's changed with your back's relationship to the floor here. Where is the spine now? And cross the right leg over the left. So you may need to shift the left a little bit. And again, notice how does that change your relationship with the floor. We're going to gently sink the knees to the right now. And just notice how far you can take your knees easily. How does the pelvis turn? The lower back? How far up through your spine do you feel this movement? And then bring them back to where you began. See if you can feel, try it again, see if you can feel this sequential motion through your lumbar spine, through your thoracic. How far up do you feel the opening on one side of the chest, the closing on the other, the ribs? Let's try once more, sinking the legs to the right. How far do you take them easily? Remember to not stretch, just to notice how that movement is for you. And then uncross the legs. Take the legs long on the floor. And rest a moment. It's an active rest. We're going to listen to the weight behind the pelvis now. Is there a difference in the right side of the pelvis to the left in how it's lying on the floor? Is there a difference in the right side of the chest compared to the left in how it's lying on the floor. And the span of the lower back, does it feel more lifted from the floor compared to when you first laid down or closer? We don't make judgments when we're listening, we're just noticing. Again, bringing the legs up into standing. Comfortable place for the feet. And now we're going to bring our hands into a triangle position in front of our chest. So the hands are straight, the palms are together. You may have done this lesson a few times. Keep the elbows straight, the palms pressed gently together. I like to say we're using a Feldenkrais type glue, so they're not going to slide on each other. They're just gently pressed together. And we're sinking the arms to the left. Allow the head to follow the fingers. That's it. And again, listening to this sequential rotation through the spine, sinking the arms, to the left. The next time the hands are in the middle, take the left leg long on the floor. So the left leg lies long on the floor and the hands sink to the left again. Notice how far do you go now with the leg long? Do you go a little further, easier? Does pressing through the right foot feel like it would make sense somewhere in this movement pattern? Where in the movement pattern of sinking the arms to the left does it make sense to press through the right foot a little bit? Does that help? That's it. And the next time your hands are in the middle, bring the left leg back up to standing. Sink the arms to the left again and see if you can still go the same distance as you did with the leg long, or is it not as far? Okay, arms down, legs long, and rest a moment. Checking in with the weight of the pelvis on the floor. Is there a difference in the right side compared to the left? The weight behind the chest. Is there a difference in the right side compared to the left? And the span of the lower back. Is there a difference? We've just done one side of this movement. Let's try one more on this side. So bringing the feet up into standing. And taking the right leg over the left again. And sink the legs once to the right here. Notice, how is that now? Is it any different compared to when you first sunk the legs to the right before? How far through your spine do you feel that rotation? When the legs are in the middle, take the right arm above your head now, somewhere on the floor comfortably. It doesn't need to be completely straight above the head, just somewhere comfortable above shoulder level. And now sink the legs to the right. How far do you go easily here with the arm above your head? Can you feel that sequential turning of the spine? That's it. And back up. The next time the legs are to the right, leave them there. And in a wide arc with the arms still on the floor, bring the right arm back down to your side. That's it. And then bring the legs back up. Uncross the legs. Take the legs long. So that's all we'll do on this side. So notice as you rest there now, is there a difference in the right side of the pelvis compared to the left? Is there a difference in the right side of the chest compared to the left? The span of the lower back, does one side feel more lifted than the other? So bringing the legs up into standing again, about a hip distance apart, comfortably on the floor. Crossing the left leg over now. And go slow, gentle to the left now. Just go as slow and go as far as comfortable on this side. It may feel a little bit different to the first side. But listening to that sequential motion through the spine. Gently tilting the legs. How far through your spine do you feel the movement on this side? And once more. What's different on this side compared to the right side? Uncross the legs. Legs long. Listening into what's changing and how you're connected to the floor now. So the weight behind your pelvis, the weight behind your chest, the curve and arch of the lumbar spine. Bringing your legs back up into standing. Placing the arms in front of you now. So in the triangle position, the elbows are straight, the palms are pressed together, and we're sinking the hands to the right. Noticing, what is it like on this side? How far do you go easily? How can you feel that sequential motion through the spine? Watching the hands with the eyes, or with your eyes closed. Next time the hands are in the middle, take the right leg long on the floor. Again, sinking the arms to the right. And a little bit of pressure through the left foot. Where does it make sense to place a little pressure through the left foot? Can that help the movement? It's not how far you go, it's how you listen to yourself. What's different on this side compared to the first side? Next time you're in the middle, bring the right leg back up into standing. Once again, sink the arms to the right and notice, how is that now? Sinking, that's it. Gently, and then let everything down, legs long, arms by your side. Take a moment to rest. And with Feldenkrais, the rests aren't about resting because we've worked hard, we've trained our body hard. It's a chance to listen into what's changing on how we're resting on the floor so that the brain has a chance to detect what's changing. So, what is the weight like behind the pelvis now? The weight behind the chest? The span of the lower back? And it's this listening that helps the brain change and discover what's best for ourselves. Bringing the legs back up into standing. And crossing the left leg over the right. And sinking the legs to the left. How is that now? And then bringing the left arm up somewhere above our head on the floor. Sinking the legs. What is it like on this side? Sinking the legs, that's it. And next time you find the legs on the left, slowly take the arm back down by your side in a wide arc along the floor. Leave it there, bring the legs back up into where you began. Let's do one more on each side. So sinking the legs to the left and noticing, what is it like to sink the legs now? How do you feel this rotation through your spine? And bring them back up. Before we take a complete rest to finish off this short exploration, let's uncross the legs and cross the right leg over. Come back to our very first movement we did when we started to move in this exploration and sinking the legs to the right. What is that like now? Feeling that sequential motion through the spine. And bringing them back up. And uncross the legs. Legs long again on the floor. Taking a final moment, we just did a short exploration to check in now with how are you resting on the floor? What is the weight like behind your pelvis compared to when you first laid down? Is there a difference in the right side compared to the left? A difference in the weight behind the chest? The right side compared to the left? And how is the span of the lower back now? Does it feel more lifted or closer to the floor? And when you're ready, roll around to one side or the other to come to a sitting position. Lovely. Sit for a moment and do a little rotation before you come up to standing. And then you might want to come to standing, do a little rotation in standing. That's the end of that short exploration. Thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you so much, Angela. You taught that so well. It was a real easy to follow your instructions and listen to your voice. You've obviously been at it a long time. Could I ask you, what would be your top tip for teachers who are now going online? If there's one thing that you could offer them in terms of teaching online, what would that be?
So teaching online is different to teaching in person. And the difference being, in person, we can see a person, with Feldenkrais in particular, we can watch their breathing patterns. We can watch the subtle differences that happen throughout the body when we're live. We can't necessarily see that on live video, on a online class. So that does take a little bit getting used to. But if you work with the students you're working with to point their camera at themselves in a way where you can see them easily, that helps. And also if you know your students as well. So spending some time, not just offering the class to anybody, but spend a couple of minutes asking them at the start of the class how they are, what they're struggling with, what they're working on, or even a separate call, a separate 10, 20-minute call to really get to know who's in your classes. That's my one tip, I would say. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Angela. Is there a website that people can find you at?
So my Feldenkrais online programs you can find at www.feldenkraisonline.com.au. And my website is flexiblemindbody.com.au.
Angela Mcmillan, it was wonderful talking to you today in Adelaide, and thank you for the lesson and thank you for your words.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining the Somatic Movement Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit somaticmovementsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs, to support you in waking up in all the areas of your life and taking inspired action, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this embodied path to vitality and wholeness with your friends and family.